from a layman's perspective, like a total like entry level physics student, let's say that's me at this stage. There's this feeling that a lot of it has already been solved. We have this idea, or certainly I do, that people like Einstein or Stephen Hawking came along and they figured out various weird and wonderful theories, and that's it. You know, we all know stuff now. But it's you know, it's too complicated for me to understand, I suppose, is where I'm at with it. Or there's a sort of consensus that it's not solved, that the universe is this total mystery, but it would take a real bloody clever clogs like Daniel Whiteson to figure it all out. So I'll just go back to my reality TV and Twitter, you know, like. So I guess you get asked this a lot, but you know, your book is called "We Have No Idea." Could you give us some examples, like working examples that we would recognize or would be able to understand of things that we simply do not know, physics-wise, or more specifically in the universe?
Sure. And, you know, your comment is really on point. And it was something like 150 years ago that people had a similar feeling. It was in the late 1800s. People felt like, well, physics is mostly wrapped up. You know, we understand how things move, and we understand little things and big things, and, you know, have ideas about the universe. And of course, most of those ideas were totally wrong, and they just didn't realize it. But there were a few little things that they didn't have a handle on, a couple of pesky details they needed to sort out. And as they pulled on those pesky details, it turned out they unraveled basically the entire firmament of physics and replaced it with something new, relativity and quantum mechanics. And it turns out that the rules of the tiny little particles were totally different from the rules that baseballs follow, and that space and time were completely different from what Newton had imagined. You know, space and time are actually like dynamic, flexible things that change and bend in response to mass. It's crazy. It's bonkers, the kind of things we teach students these days. But the interesting thing about that is that at the time, the clues were small. They thought they had mostly everything figured out, and there were just a couple little things to unravel. We're in a different situation today. Today, we're in a situation where the clues are huge and screaming and massive, and it's obvious to anybody who's studying the field that we have an enormous amount left to learn. So you asked me, like, what's an example of something we don't know? Well, you know, some of the biggest questions, like, how big is the universe? We just don't know how much stuff there is out there. Like, if you want to explain what's the universe made out of, first, you know, what is the universe after all? And we can see really far, so we know the universe extends at least 90-something billion light years, but we just don't know what's beyond that. And the ideas are crazy. Maybe it goes on forever, like literally forever, as in a beam of light you send out today could travel forever, you know, never stopping. There is no end to time.
This is the thing. Or like, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, it's so mind blowing. Like this is exactly it. Like where it challenges the bounds of your of anyone's intelligence. Where you could say, well, how big is the universe? And you say, like, I mean, it, like you just said a second ago, it could go on forever. But in our sort of, you know, primitive human brain, we're like, well, nothing goes on forever. I mean, save for a few unfortunate podcast episodes. But, you know, the idea that this space could expand forever, and it's just like, no, something has to be beyond it. But then you get into, I suppose, this sort of half philosophical thing where it's like, well, you know, could it go on forever? What could go, you know?
Right. And it's really fascinating to hear people contrast the scientific ideas with what they feel is natural or would make sense. And what would make sense has really changed over time. Like you say, it's crazy to think that the universe could go on forever. You know, in a similar way, you might think it's crazy to imagine the universe has existed forever. Well, 100 or so years ago, people thought it was obvious that the universe had existed forever. You know, the stars just hung up in the sky and nothing was changing. Why would anything ever change? Why should anything have ever changed? Obviously, it's been like this forever. And then when we discover that, no, there are other galaxies out there and they're expanding, and it turns out the universe seems to have had some sort of beginning 13 billion years ago, now it seems clearly natural for people to think, oh no, the universe obviously has to have a beginning. So like what feels natural to you, what feels like a reasonable explanation changes over time. And that's really the value of science, right? It's this incredible method to systematically build knowledge despite your intuition, despite your like philosophical leanings about how the universe should be. The universe just is the way it is. It doesn't give a dang about, our ideas about philosophy.